Peace. Salam. I'm reviewing some of my other videos that I've put out, and I'm I'm just noticing that I've said several times on this topic of homosexuality, and I haven't done it very much justice. Now, homosexuality is a term that was invented in maybe the 1820s in the English language by a guy called Alfred Kinsey. Alfred Kinsey wrote this book, no one asked him to, that was about all the different kinds of homosexuality, and there he invented the word homosexuality. Even worse than inventing this term homosexuality, which has sort of defined an issue and not in a very good way, that a couple of hundred years later, there's still no peace on this issue. There's no resolution. That it's not good to be called gay. It's not good to be gay. It's not good to that you get less rights if you're gay. This gay thing, this category of homosexual, well, it's contingent upon the idea that we would come in two varieties. That's how Kinsey puts it down, and we don't come in two varieties. So my big why do I call the Pope of all people a fascist? Was because he's listening to the fascist media and going along with the sort of contemporary norms which are manifestly harmful. The contemporary norms are harmful even to those who are called homosexual, and this Francis character, and that's not his real name, has introduced this idea of a lesser marriage, and there's the sacrament of marriage. We don't have any lesser sacraments, but he's got this civil union for homosexuals, so it's still a subjugated status for these people that he's talking about. It's absolutely not derived from scriptures, because we don't have a category of homosexual from our scriptures. We don't have a category of same-sex unions, and like as a lesbian, I'm allowed to be very annoyed at the idea that same-sex, even if you could make some identification of what it's like when, let's say, a person with a what has sex with a person with a what. It's maybe different because this is defined in terms of males and females, this idea of homosexuality, which isn't the present truth. Well, then the category of women who have sex with women or females who have sex with females has got to be different to the category of males who have sex with males. But no, always the lesbian voice is the less sort of supported. Gay men get very much more of the LGBT clique of everything, and the rest of the LGBT clique kind of know this. And this Francis, I don't know his real name, but he's interjected something which is completely not from the scriptures at a time of crisis for everyone, including the people who believe in him. And at this moment, he's going to make some really big contentious change to, like, does the Catholic Church listen to its scriptures, or does it listen to the pop media 10 years late, 20 years late? It's really disgusting, and he doesn't know how harmful it is. The fact that just a few years ago, he was very, like, openly, well, anti-gospelic. He's gone completely the opposite way than Jesus on the issue of trans people. Jesus is Christ. if you're the Pope of the thing. So all of this isn't a way to avoid speaking about what people do. I just haven't spoken about what people do. I'm talking about the categories. This book that this Alfred Kinsey wrote, which invented the category of homosexuals. You don't have homosexuals before. You don't have homophobia before, because there's no word for it. Who are you going to pick on if there's no word for it? That's not quite as malicious, the making up all the homophobia in one stroke, as what he also did in that book was make up diagnostic psychiatry. That there wasn't really a manual like this before on how you could write out, here's a way that a person can be, that's inherently pathologizable, that, here's a way that you can be wrong in the head. We didn't have that. Well, psychiatry, for a long time and up to the present day, its mainstay has been people who are called stupid and people who are called gay. It's as advanced and as complex as a playground institution, and the things that they have done is much, much worse under these pretenses that people are stupid or that they're gay. They get put into horrible, horrible scenarios, including where I have been, which was very, very horrible. And I noticed that there are more trans people there than I've ever seen in the world, all just in prison for no trial, no charge, just being seen as so different that you're mentally ill. I'm furious at that Francis because of what he's doing to categories and how he's playing categories and how in the middle of this, of course you can get headlines doing that, but you're really letting go of all the people who want to listen to the scriptures and want a Catholic church who guides scripturally, that it's a complete divorce from that. And Jesus said, I don't accept divorce. It's just so clear. So I'm here saying Islam is for everyone. The Islamic State is for everyone. Everyone can join. Also, we don't need anyone's ways to change. And I'm also keep on coming back to this issue that we really don't have a problem. We really don't want to encourage within the Islamic world homosexuality in the same way that perhaps the West doesn't want to encourage child sex. I think that's good. I see the standards of consent in the West. I don't think any of you should be having sex with children. Also, Muslims don't want homosexuality within our culture and society. Why is it? I mean, and in general, that's not to speak of all Muslims. Our text doesn't force us. Like in the case of all the scriptures, say the Judaic scriptures. I mean, the Jewish bit, the Christian bit, the Muslim bit, they all tie up. In the case of all of these, God has never put within the divine revelations, be nasty to gays, or do nasty things to gays, or even discourage gays, or whatever. The clearest bit that people talk about is in the laws of the people who smashed up the law of Moses. And it's not the moral of that story that you're supposed to follow the law of the people who smashed up the Ten Commandments. The story is they smashed up the Ten Commandments, and even the people who still practice these laws, they say of themselves that we were given a better law, our ancestors smashed them up, we were given this worse law by God, and we practice the worst law because that's what we've got given to us. It's not the worst law in the world. Don't mix cottons, or don't mix textiles. Why? That's what the people made up when they smashed up the law, and that's what we got. Don't let any sorceresses live. That's not a very egalitarian law. Sorceresses have every right to live, except there. And that culture, that community, they didn't want any sorceresses. And God didn't want that community, that culture, to have any sorceresses, because he was fine approving that law for them after they smashed up the Ten Commandments. That's where we find homosexuality, not far from the kill all the sorceresses bit, not far after the bit where God says, here's the 10 rules. And then again, here's the 10 rules, because he sends them down twice. And then the people smash them up, and they get this entirely different set of laws. No shellfish and stuff. No, that's not in the Ten Commandments. But the Ten Commandments also isn't the moral of the story that those people were supposed to take away the Ten Commandments. No, they smashed them up. They got this other law. But for everyone else in the world, looking back on this incident in history, those people still have survivors, like people living on that lineage. That's incredible when you think about, like, the French Revolution was not 300 years ago. But people have been keeping cultures going for a really long time without breaking, and in fact, without being hunted down or anything. They made it. Whereas, the world that sort of started about the French Revolution, this secular democracy thing, it's not 250 years old, and already, what's the West going to look like in 100 years' time? It's either going to be gone, or there's still going to be chaos, and it's going to be gone. but none of the people, none of the ways. And what about all those people who they're happily men, like they're married and they've got kids? Some of them. Well, Muslims certainly aren't going to have any problem with the fact that other people have men marrying men and do all these sorts of things. It's our job to be distinct from that if we want to be distinct from that. So it's our job to defend ourselves from cultural invasion if somebody wants to culturally invade us. That plugs the thing in. Within our own spaces, it's entirely up to our own imams and people all around to interpret the scriptures as they think is best. And I've got an amazing argument, very strong, but we don't have to accept any sort of premise of homosexuality. Going back to what I said and got on a tangent that, you know, Jesus certainly doesn't come and say anything about your sex lives. It says something about marriage, says stuff about trans people, doesn't talk about anyone's sex lives. Paul does a bit, and that's also a theme that you got the messenger of God here. You got someone who's very, very woke. And then you've got the people who describe them. And behold, Paul is the one who introduces the idea of immoral sexuality to not the Gospels, because they're not in the Gospels, but next to the Gospels. Within our scriptures, God hasn't ever come down, the Almighty, and said, singular, and said, be nasty to gays, or we don't approve of gays. In fact, a comprehensive scriptural review, he said everything but. It's never been explicit from God in the instructions that we're supposed to find any moral distinction between a person who has sex with anyone else with consent. That's not been, the closest we've got. It's that time when the people smashed up the 10 Commandments and they wrote themselves a different law and then went away going, we've got a worse law because God said so, because we smashed up God's law, and that's our lot. And those people have turned out perfectly decently. They still live on Earth today. They're still doing thing. I'm pretty sure their men aren't raping. That's good. That's worked out for them. They didn't need homosexuality. Some places in the world do have homosexuality. What are believers supposed to think about that? I mean, if we're believing in the scriptures, we've got some basically sufficient evidence either way. I don't think that this account in the Torah is sufficient evidence that, like, anyone except for the people who they already know that they don't mix textiles and they already know that they're not going to let a sorceress live. These, and not dismissively, I'm really against the people who kill witches, except for those guys, because that's not all the cultures are supposed to be the same, and it's clearly they've got this consistent moral system, and it involves slaying sorceresses. I don't even know where that's turned out like bad for them. I know in other places who aren't those people, they've taken the sorceress killing thing way too far, and that would be a cool thing to address when we get there. The other really tangible don't have sex with men if you're a man thing is not from all of the rest of what's known as the Old Testament and the line of prophets who came, peace and blessings be upon them, for that group of people, nor in Christian texts do we have any mention of even that category, of those categories in the mixture. No, Paul talks about immoral sex practices happening somewhere, but that's about it. It's not in the Quran, anything to do with that. Nope. There's a mention to the people of Lot. Peace and blessings be upon him. They wanted to rape an angel, or a couple of angels. And it's very, very clear that the Quranic imperative from Lot, peace and blessings be upon him, both isn't directed to the reader, because the Quran never does that really. That, you know, there's this exhortation, there's this story about a prophet in the past speaking to his people, and you know that we don't take that in those cases to be applying to us today. We see that it's good moral guidance, and that they said it, and that was their thing to say to that group of people. Also, there's absolutely no way that his statement to the people can possibly be talking about the kind of sexual relations between, say, a male and a male, where animals do that. And he said that no creature has done this before. You need to go through. So there's this one thing near the smashing up of the Ten Commandments, and then you go through all of the revealed text and all of the real text, Messiah, and then you get to Muhammad and the Quran, peace and blessings be upon him, and then within the ahadith, within the 40,000 Sahih ahadith, maybe more. There's basically one statement. There's one statement that's repeated a few times, and it's easy to say that this statement that isn't part of the Quran is not in a revealed text. It's something that was the scientific work by Bukhari, who found a good way of checking whether a hadith were trustworthy or not. And within here, there's a statement that a few people attribute that this one person said, if a man has sex with a man, you should kill the one who's doing it and the one who's done to. My good piece of work. I know I did a good piece of Islamic scholarship a good few years ago. I didn't show anyone, but it was about exactly this topic, and about every evidence that we have on non-normative sexuality. I wanted to get through to non-normative gender, but I wanted to start on non-normative sexuality. Non-normative sexuality, that's what we've got. We've got one hadith thereabout. If we reject that hadith as being true, if we say, no, some people have said that Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, have said this, but it doesn't connect up to the rest of the book, and there's some strong arguments about how it can, how at face value it seems to contradict some of the other hadith, that like we know exactly the crimes that require or can possibly lead to a capital punishment. And here is a statement saying, here's what can lead to a capital punishment. And we've got another statement which is much more known and cherished and carried around, that here are the only 3 cases where it can ever require capital punishment. And so if these things contradict at all, then this one just has to be false. It's not like it's a bit true. Now, one of the 3 things that you can be killed for is zina, which is sexual immorality that doesn't have to mean homosexuality, because homosexuality as a category hasn't been put forward to us. It doesn't have to mean the man who has sex with men, but if you have a category of zina and you consider that immoral, then it's consistent. So from a comprehensive review of the Judaic scriptures, I fall on the line that we're not obliged to be homophobic. We're not encouraged to be malicious toward anyone or go around asking people who they have sex with. We are really, really invested on how well our system of marriage and system of culture will work out. And I think it's striking that in my plainest conscience, I think that the Lord Almighty has revealed lots of things to lots of people, and there's certainly a theme within the Judaic revelations taken as a whole, that it is revealed to us almost that we need to ban homosexuality. That the closest, most explicit thing you get to it is that hadith. After all of these revelations and after this Quran, unless you're the group who don't mix textiles, which you're not, unless you are at peace, shalom. But most people aren't. You have to wait until Ibn Abbas to get any kind of God agrees with us if we don't like gays, if you don't like gays. I started out being completely okay, thinking, well, that's not a moral issue at all, who you want to enjoy your romance and your body with. But then I've turned around on it, and I think that the Almighty doesn't want to get involved in our degrees, but it's a good wisdom anyway. That if we take things at face value, then we've got to accept that hadith from Ibn Abbas. But what have we got to accept as a hadith, anhu, which has been collected by human hands and has been narrated by human hands, and it's absolutely vital that it's not part of the Quran. However, I think both interpretations of the scriptures are equally valid. That one of them, we're supposed to be very cautious of this and extremely cautious of this within our societies. That's perfectly consistent with what's said. Also, we don't have to be. It requires just saying one hadith is instead of Sahih, Hasan, perhaps. Or just we don't accept that as the gospel truths. Then, with that one hadith gone, you've got the entire corpus of Judeo-Christio-Islam, that whole big thing from Abraham, peace and blessings be upon him, that there's no explicit don't be gay in it, except for in the law of the people who smashed up the really good law and got a law that they accept that they were being punished by having to get that bad law. I would suggest you just don't have to be as fair as me, that I can't make a decision on it because I've read all the things and they're just both equally consistent. But if you've got any leaning whatsoever, then reject or accept that hadith. I will go even further and say then, because of my own sentiment and having reviewed the scriptures and gone, that's how it is, that you can take either side, and it's been massively underrepresented, that the entire homosexuality is Judeo scriptures really falls down upon that one hadith from a boy who was like 10 when the Prophet died, peace and blessings be upon him, as the sole carrier of this piece of quite important sexual jurisprudence, if it's very important. I can totally see rejecting that. I would say in any other circumstance where I wasn't biased towards the other side, but it's not biased because I've come to this since writing this essay. Anyway, if you reject that hadith, Islam has nothing to do with homophobia. For a good reason, I'm not advocating that that's what we got to do. Got to guess, then surely we guess that there's no homophobia and we just leave it at that. Yeah. Is that the same as saying there's not allowed to be any spaces on Earth? That, you're going to have a group of men there and just, none of them are gay. You can bend over doing your prayers and no one's going to look. And I know no one is any particularly, I'm this sexuality, so I'm more likely a sex predator. No. But I really think there's, but it's got nothing to do with the scriptures. Scriptures leaves it both way, leaves us to judge. Surely we judge no, we don't even have a category of homosexuality. If it's equally evidenced, then we don't come away from that saying we have a category of homosexuality. Okay? So all of my concerns about perhaps it doesn't create good things in the long run culturally if you have men in that position, in relation to other men. And I don't mean sex position, I mean uh, seeking validation in that way and being able to form this tuplet, which is just two men validating each other. And we do see strange things, but those are cultural. Those aren't to do with the act or the relationship. I'm happy to have filmed myself being really uncomfortable about just even thinking about that. But if there's no like sexual displays in public spaces, then it really doesn't bother everyone. There are sexual displays in public spaces. Homosexuals don't have a monopoly on that. Homosexual identified people don't have a monopoly on that. Marriage, then, we wouldn't have a distinction. If that hadith is false, then people can get married as they wish. If that hadith is true and you cannot, okay, so good. I get my bit. You're not allowed to say that everyone in the world has to find that hadith false. And then there's places in the world where people don't want homosexuality in their holy spaces and towns which are based around, like, we just want everything holy. We don't want, it's not like there's a masjid in a town and that's where the Islam happens. So much of this problem is just caused by the emasculation of men. Does homosexuality contribute to that in a special way? I don't know, so I'm not going to judge. Yeah. A man is a construct. And what you do whilst you're calling yourself a man, how you create what men are. We have a perfectly good misc category that you don't have to be a man because of what your body is. It doesn't mean that you would have to perform anything different. It's really good to have a misc category. We're certainly not insisting that men who identify as men and want to have sex with men. Gender categories are about your behavior. They're entirely about your behavior. The West chooses to call people men and women for a social reason, no other reason. And it is an ideal, and the ideal has its substance from what people do. It's just one of those cases where, again, there's no one to push us around. So, like, happily, the West can have gay men. Muslims can have spaces where we don't encourage that at all, and we don't want to hear about it. We don't want to see it. We can have big utopian spaces where none of that is visible. And we can also have the kind of Muslim who goes, no, actually, that hadith isn't very well supported. If you're a Muslim from here, you can still be a Muslim and gay by going to the very many Muslims who will completely accept you and embrace you as a person who wants to do whichever kind of sex act you wanted to do, which wasn't good with the people who are taking the scriptures literally. There will be no invasions. Seems like that matter settled. Yeah. So some places in the world where we define that act as just the same, and the same word as rape, because I mean we're led by a prophet. It's about consequences, peace and blessings be upon him. But we truly believe that if you do sexually immoral stuff now, it's gonna lead to sexually immoral stuff later. And we believe that for a male to have sex with a male, unless one of them is trans, it's going to be zina. Who are trans people allowed to sleep with? There's no guidance on it whatsoever. It seems like a different topic. You know, everyone who's interested in gay men isn't the people who are interested in trans people. I'm going to go take a picture. It's what I'm going to do next. Go outside and go to Pentonville Prison, where they put me in the transgendered women and sex offenders ward. I'm going to go take a picture of the rainbow flag that's on their ceiling, because they've got a rainbow flag coming out of the roof. And it's very transphobic kind of roof they've got there, and walls. If you're putting trans women in with the men, that's not the same punishment for me as it is for the men at all. They love it. They've got a lot of men around. I didn't like it. They've got table football, they've got Xboxes, they've got no toilet seats. They love it. I didn't enjoy it. And like, you know, I met another trans woman there. She was there for dodging taxes. Allahu Akbar, that's a good thing to do. But she's in with the sex offenders now. It's a good picture of the flag on the roof opportunity. It's there next to the Union Jack, and it's weird. It's weird to question the morality of homosexuality, because in the short term, what's the difference if you use a hand or a fleshlight or a sheep? Or it's that one case that I never used to be this way. I never used to be this way. And I've slept with all the different kinds of people, but I see the consequences now. I see the kind of degradation we live in this moment in time, all the things that have gone wrong. I mean, it's entirely the men are too weak to overthrow the weak men who are running the system. And they're too deferent. They're too obedient. And oh my gosh, they are too entertained by the shows of stature by men to other men. There's too much men impressing other men going on. I walk down the street, and whether I look like a woman or a man, I get checked out by men, and only men. Let's start with, you've got to have sexual morality somewhere. And you've got to have sexual morality because men. Nothing else is causing a big problem. You've got to have men having some boundary, something that they can practice not going near, something that they go, no, we don't do that because it's sexually immoral. If you could have people all running around with that category of, we don't do that because it's sexually immoral, that's very good. And if it's mainly for men, what shall you proscribe? There's nothing wrong if they have sex with acorns or goats. But if they could just not have sex with each other, these beings would have a particularly volatile relationship with sex. I think it should run through the community, top to bottom. The men are supposed to control themselves. About what? Well, they can get like endless sex in ways that become very diverse if they want to have sex with each other. It's almost like cheating, but okay, it doesn't give the same results as having sex with a woman, but it's much easier. And we don't agree that you can't choose who you want to have sex with. Like, we have marriage. That's a commitment. That's a contract. That's a really special thing that you get one of in your lifetime or something. And anyone you're married to, you do it in front of God, and you subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you accept that God has chosen this marriage for you. And okay, so our religious deeds is called deen. That what we do for our religion, that's deen. Every decision we make for our religion and on account of our religion, that is deen. Every move we make that's religious is deen. Half of our deen is marriage. So marriage is huge for us. So it's not the same as, well, if you're having sex with different people, every year, every month, every week, all of those things are great. But not for us, because we've got this very special category of marriage. And if you're going to get married to someone, gosh, in every case, it would be better if you'd be able to have children. At least to have the option there. There's something very good for a man about having a wife. And it's not like a commodity, it's that he learns from her. And something that a man can learn in their lifetime is raising a child. Yeah, it can be done with adoption. We're actually very strangely not big on adoption. It's there's this one thing in the Quran which almost looks like an error, and it is to do with adoption. Just Allah makes, he has a plan that we don't know about. So the idea isn't at all ever that even within an Islamic state there would be no homosexuality. No, that's what we've just sorted out. That there's going to be, in an Islamic state, some Muslims who want like that rainbow ethic, and I really see the goodness in it, if not the effects of it. I see the beauty in the ideal, and it's not for me to say, whilst we've got rainbow flags, we've still got the same people persecuted, but maybe more so. And because before homosexuality, there wasn't homophobia. There was no way to promote homophobia. There was no way to teach it. And now there is. That rainbow ethic, it seems good on paper. I'll definitely agree. Has the world with the rainbow ethic figured out how to treat gay men, lesbians, bisexuals, and transgendered people who are completely different? Because my transgendered has nothing to do with sex. I don't want to be seen as a sexual object for being transgendered, which happens to be constantly, which happens actually within the rainbow ethic. Like, who gave you the right to compare a man who has sex with men to me? Even if I've been a hooker. it's no, gross. I find it gross. I'm allowed to find it gross. Other people tell me all the time they find people having sex with children gross. Guess what? I don't find that gross. I find men having sex with men gross. Only having read a lot of history and only having come to this idea completely by myself. I started with the scriptures. I read all the scriptures. I wrote my scriptural review that says basically it's this one bit. We can accept that or not. Move along, study more history, then go, ooh. It really has just been men who are fucking things out for it. And I mean, patriarchy, there's patriarchy and theocracy. There hasn't been another thing to disturb easy, peaceful, minimal, everyone just agrees on stuff ways, except for patriarchy. It does it by segregation. does it by men in little cliques together who play rituals to each other. It was pretty normal when King James VI and first, no, fifth. And who am I thinking of? Was King James V and first? Didn't it have him? Yeah. The person who commissioned the English language Bible. An amazing monarch for this country. The first Stuart came and, like, they were king from a very young age, but just the best kind of king you could have wanted at that time. They were really, really interested in sort of fixing the best kind of king you could have wanted at that time. They were really, really interested in sort of fixing the massacred church situation that the Tudors had smashed up the church, tried to repair it, smashed it up again, and the thing that was left wasn't really good. King James comes in and he fixes that, and he fixes that to a long way. He is a theologian. He makes sense of the idea of divine right, and he really patches up like what is post-Tudor England. Looking at Tudor England as a bit of a catastrophe that no one won out of that situation. King James tries to fix it up. Well, he was known for having sex with his handsome servant men, and he would always have a favorite that would be his handsome servant man that he would fuck. What's my point? Well, there was no homophobia in those days. Like, people didn't have there are writings and commentaries from the time going like, oh, that King James. I didn't have a category to go, he's a gay and make things worse that way. And the men who lead, they don't really look for anyone else's approval. They've had all this time to acknowledge women. Haven't. There's been a very small group of people who are very insular, very cloistered, who have been leading countries and doing so much harm compared to everyone else. And they're a group of men who are happy to have no one else's but men's approval, who do lots of things for status which are inherently showy and showy for other men. I don't know how you can get men who are so impressed with each other to, for instance, create a League of Nations other than there's a culture that they're fucking each other behind the scenes. It's a hypothesis. But the world that's manifested, okay, so emasculation of men is one big problem. That they got no opportunities, but they do. But no one's handing them any opportunities, so it looks like they don't have any opportunities. They're not willing to make opportunities for themselves or deny their own degradation. That's a problem. I'm not saying that only applies to men who have sex with men. Not at all, the opposite. But also like showy offiness. And, I mentioned in my encounters with street abuse and things, everyone's got threats, and I see the hardest men on the streets. They're quite clear about who they are, and no one challenges them. Guys who wear a very particular kind of clothing and stand around in exclusively male groups, and they listen to this music which is really boo boo boo, and the words "I'm gonna shoot you and kill you" and ba ba ba, and it is. And it's showy offy. And it's for the male gaze. There's no women who are impressed hearing that you've got a gun and you're going to kill. No, but men are really impressed by that. And how did we have such a bizarre end to war? Patriarchy is solipsistic. Patriarchy is men looking only at other men. is that the influence of men who have sex with men, it's a degraded category of man that just doesn't add up to anything. And having sex with men, whilst men is a social category, I can't make it overly explicit, and I'm certainly not saying that men who have sex with men, like, they're the ones who are fucking up culture, but I really do believe in a culture that there can be something beautiful about it, where we say, no, no, we don't want that in our territories. And you know, a Muslim man in general isn't going to do these things, but a Western man can. And we're going to have our people who deny that hadith on perfectly reasonable scriptural grounds, so that Muslim men can be gay. Just be different kinds of men. Um, there are some people who, if I have a family, I don't want my child being encouraged to be gay. I want them to have a family. I think that'd be great. I want them to think that they can choose for themselves what they do in life, whom they love, and that they can make themselves pretty much anything they want to be. And all of those things, you just don't particularly want to be a gay man. I mean, the West is cheering about gays for some time, like since the 80s in the UK, since it stopped being illegal to talk about. And all of a sudden, West is the gay messiah. No. um, like, that system hasn't sorted itself either. Let's have everyone, like, the rainbow ethic hasn't given anything yet. Not to the rainbow people, not to anyone. It doesn't work. We've got a system that we consider works. So we do believe in it, and I hope that helps as to why. I know that whilst there's rainbow flag on my alma mater prison, and geez, UN making in Israel, making rainbow flags in Israel and things. Uh, right, and I'm writing this, try and destroy a failed civilization and try and destroy a culture, try and disband the culture simply by writing and calling it out. I know that if I say something like, and it's true, that men of the West are relatively homosexual compared to Muslim men, like, that's going to come across as an insult to you guys. You don't treat your gay men well. You just say that some are allowed to be that and whatever. You're lying with your mouths. People still think that it's degrading to be a man who has sex with men. No one has really come up with a counter to that. Just that, leave us alone. It's we want to. It's different to morality. There is no morality without consequences. The way that the tolerant side of the world deals with, I'm going to call it rainbow ethicality, it hasn't added up to anything other than, I'm talking about a rape culture, and I'm talking about not quite the last 3 decades within this rape culture, and not the last year within this rape culture. You haven't sorted out how you treat the gays. In Islam, we've got one idea that works. No one's questioning it. No one's been like, oh, do we really need a new revelation from Allah the Almighty just for this gay topic, or are we okay with the scriptures we have on gay topic? Ironically, I am a prophetess, and I'm saying that the scriptures on this are absolutely fine, even in their ambiguity. That's great for us. They're not really ambiguous if you don't find them ambiguous, but there's plenty of just a perfectly reasonable argument as to why you would reject that hadith. That one statement. It's been variously transmitted. There's a few different sources for the hadith, but it's certainly not impossible that hadith is a plain misunderstanding or a mistake or something that's been added within 200 years before. I think Allah has done this for a reason, that we have a Quran, which is a Quran, and it's very Quran-like and unique. and we've got hadith, also unique but very hadith-like, and not Quran. If I would be the Khalifa of all Islam, which seems to be my imperative and prerogative, I'd say I don't want us. That hadith is true. I can see the effects in time. Listen to Ibn Abbas, radiallahu anhu. I never saw it that way. I see it that way. I wouldn't want anyone to be forced to see it that way. I would want people to come from exactly the same perfectly tolerant state as I have been, and then go, actually, but we don't need a culture that does all the things. We don't want a culture that does all the things. One thing to ban, it's a pretty good thing to ban. But I don't really get to do that. Some people are going to reject that hadith, and that's part of how we're going to make it okay for the people who. There's plenty of people right now who they're perfectly good Muslims, and they either are in love with men or want to be in love with men or something like this, who are men. All of this doesn't apply at all to anyone except for men who fuck men. There's got to be fucking for this to be applicable, and it's got to be two people who are identified as men. All of the lesbian stuff has always been okay in God's eyes because there's no harmful consequences. It's the men who have sex with men. Is our plan really that we're just going to say some people are going to reject that hadith? Of course they are. Is deportation even okay? To say that some people, they're going to be really wanting to have sex with, yep, safe spaces are okay. Community inclusion is a good principle for community and inclusion. That's okay. That's okay. We're going to have a lot more movement in the future. You don't need to stay where you are if you don't have jobs. There's a lot of the world to see, a lot of different cultures to explore. There won't be if we all live the same. There's going to be bits where we treat homosexuality as this thing that happens in other places, and we don't do anything like it because it clashes with our ideals of purity. Consequentially. If you do accept that hadith, then to you, the people who reject that hadith aren't disbelievers because they believe the entire corpus and they have every right on the scriptural evidence that's there to say, we don't really believe that Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, said that. We know it's a hadith, and we know it's a hadith. What am I getting at? Likewise, if from that community of the people who reject that one hadith, so they're going to have gay men in it, if one of those gay men meets someone from the we accept that hadith and we find that it's something that we really, really don't want to do or be around, this person, I know for sure, isn't allowed to takfir this person because it's just a completely justified understanding of Islam to take all of Islam except for this statement from Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu. So this person can have their entire, we've got a Disneyland of no gayness, and that's what it is, an artificial space where we try and make it so there's no gays, which isn't as cruel as it sounds because you just don't promote it and people are like, wow, women, really? It's good. But this person in return has to accept that there are some Muslims who don't see their sexuality as part of Islam and who can refer to the fact that we have no category of sexuality within Islam. And I'm going to be living over here with these ones. And then there's all of the West who do absolutely what they like. There's all of the Westerners within an Islamic state who can do exactly what they like. There's all the Jews and Christians within an Islamic state who can do exactly what Jews and Christians do. There's Zoroastrians within an Islamic state. Excellent. Zoroastrian pansexuals have a really good reputation from just about anywhere. It's important that on Earth there's going to be some people who don't draw any of those sort of categories. It's that the set of assumptions that comes to homosexual, it's still a set of assumptions, and you don't get to apply those to everyone, because that's to do with the gender binary that was made up. I want to say 1828, but I always get my 19th century dates wrong. It was Alfred Kinsey who came up with that term, and he didn't write it into our Quran. We've got our own guidance and scriptures on that. Gay marriages, what are they? If you reject that hadith, we don't have any more specifics on marriage other than how it's done. So you could marry a man if you're a man. If you reject that hadith. If these two people are married, what do we do about recognizing their marriage? We recognize their marriage. Because to me, it's fucked up that, you know, if you're a Muslim and you've got 2 wives or something, and then you go to another country, just what? You have 2 wives still. The other country to go, we don't recognize that or something. It's not like that's only an act of aggression. It doesn't do anything. It just says we're hostile to you. As long as we can say we're different to you, there shouldn't be any hostility. Do the people of the hadith accepting place, speaking about that one Ibn Abbas hadith, which is forever over here, do they get to say no gay married couples are allowed to come into our space? Because, yeah, it's their space. They get to invite who they want. I am so fair. Who spent their whole life trying to be this fair? The ones who reject the hadith, that single one, on perfectly good terms, I sorted out years ago. They're going to be ones who. Can I make any more generalizations about them? No, and the idea is self-governance. I'm talking about billions of people. I don't get to decide. But in terms of those categories, we've got the. It's good. We've got those. We're going to be asking everyone. See, here's how it's going to work, right? If you come to my patch of land where we don't raise children to be gay, we don't want children to be raised to be gay, and we don't have gay in our culture, and you want to visit there as a gay man, first, I love that you feel that you're entitled to visit every space on Earth, because not all people do, and surely it's a sign of progress that some people just have some amazing freedom, whilst Palestine, made of grids. So fucking lovely, you gays who can go everywhere. If you want to come to our space as well, where our culture has ideas of men and women and mukhanaf, and that's how it works. You know that you can visit. Just don't be caught doing gay shit in public. You'll die. And that's going to be really easy. Come. Eat our dates. Drink from our faluda. Enjoy yourself. Don't get any gay shit in our public, or else we'll have to show the kids what happens. We're allowed it. We're allowed it. You've been doing the same thing backwards, oh West. And now there's gay Palestinians. Beautiful. There's the Ummah, the sub. There's the people who reject that hadith, which if you want to be a Muslim and you want to have gay sex, we got a really good inlet for you. That one hadith, which we can't build an entire global ummah on accepting that thing when it's so controversial and it's not that well evidenced and it's very orphan, and it's just this point where we don't have to break the scriptures at all, that we can really easily assemble into just sort out this issue, which isn't our own issue. It's an externally imposed issue. We've never had an issue with this at all, but and also like the existence of gay men, and in fact the promiscuity and the public promiscuity of gay men has been a constant burden to the transgendered woman throughout history. So we get lumped into the same category. We the quiet, chaste ones, and those the public fucky ones. I don't think I've said anything bad about gay men yet. I don't think I will. The categories don't really work. I don't think that act should be encouraged, and that kind of pairing. It's that kind of pairing that shouldn't be encouraged, because it's like just pointing two mirrors at each other. Bad things could possibly happen, or at least I'm superstitious enough to see that the places in the world where they went really all in on gay sex and the rights of the gay man, they've not done very much for the gay man, and they've not done very much they've not done much for rights. I don't see it. The results, and not everyone needs to judge what's better for culture. Most people don't. Most of the words you hear people say are judging other people, absolutely unnecessary. Here I hear so much people judging. They're all talking about cultural terms. They're all talking about categories which don't really exist. That's why I'm really strict and sort of aware, saying some things we don't have a category for that. And I mean, I don't want to be colonialized by the people who taught this category of segregation. One of those is homosexual. We don't see that. We see men. We see men with choices about what they do, who they want to fuck. Not all of those choices are equal. Some have inherent virtues. Some aren't as good as those. If you're going to get married and really hope that you're going to get married once in your lifetime, if you're a man, it's not oppressive to say, we'll find a woman for you, and you kind of can expect that in your lifetime. Just hear, all of the smart women are becoming lesbians, because of course you're so much less likely to be murdered if you're a lesbian, and you get better conversations out of it. Men need a lot of work. Just in this little portion of the world that I see, and the category of man, what it means to be man, that needs a lot of work. And if it's just you can have sex with anything, for sure, you gotta do more work on your category of man. And so it can sound really reductive. It can sound really reductive and base, that anyone could say we don't like that particular thing happen, but it's not to do with homosexuality, because we're a-okay. And what do you think has sometimes happened if someone has, for instance, a harem with 10,000 women in it who are all married to one man? Do they have sex with other men? No, of course they don't. Where do they live? Big brothely boudoirs where everything's taken care from them. Do they masturbate? Probably not that much. And same if you've got, several wives. It's certainly not in any of our scriptures that they can't touch each other, or even that they can't be married to each other. For men and women, the instruction is the same, and it's take as many wives as you want, 2, 3, or 4. The only way that can work for everyone is that some people are doubling up, and you would need, you would need all the wives to have themselves 2, 3, or 4 wives. We're very liberal. We have the type of marriage that you can do and it lasts half an hour, and in advance you say it's going to last for half an hour, and here's the terms. Here's what's expected of me. Here's what's expected of you, and here's what kind of dowry we're going to exchange if we're going to exchange a dowry. It's good. Whilst we've got that, it's really clear where the line on rape is, because that's how much agreement it takes to have consent. This idea of marriage, even if it's not a big church marriage, with as an orphan you can get married just with God's witness, like a superpower. And it's true, it's useful. It hasn't really worked out for me very well, but it's been okay. I would really suggest that for the West, you want to write down who you're going to have sex with. Like, a rape culture from the furthest out lens is just where you don't know, there's no system of consensual sex. Tumblr and Grindr and all of these institutions, but they don't suffice for figuring out how to make good relationships. If you could have a good relationship instead of a good, I had sex with lots of people in my 20s, you would find the good relationship a lot better. You'd get a lot more from that. You'd spend a lot less on it. You'd be less at risk for things. And then by the time you're 30, you're sitting on a relationship that's lasted you 10 years and you're really comfortable with that person and you've got all the stuff that you've gained and achieved with that person. That's great. It's maybe better than sleeping with a load of different people. And how did you do it? The pop culture and the same moves and you have sort of the same shallow relationship with all of those people who come and go, and they've all got completely different personalities and souls. But how are you going to learn that when you're having casual dates and things? Not to say that anyone shouldn't be having casual dates. No, we've got a system of marriage where if you want, you can get married for an evening. It's not encourageable for everyone, and it's not what we've chosen to do most of the time, but it's there. Now, religion is about thinking about the future, and our guidance is all about consequences, how things are going to end up. And people used to be really happy with marriage as an idea and as a thing. You didn't see people going, we're too married. If only we could all spend our 20s in very expensive single rooms and sort of meet each other for glorified sleepovers sometimes and buy each other pizza and have Netflix. And you might want, as the West, to grow up, which means you've been belittled by the pop culture, that the pop culture hasn't made you more mature, and it has replaced the old culture that was here. None of English culture today has T.S. Eliot in it. None. That's archaeology. And he's a beautiful English poet. Instead, Rick and Morty is. I can quote Rick and Morty, and there's going to be more people who get Rick and Morty than Let Us Go Now, You and I. The Wasteland. So I think the next bit is constructive criticism for the West, because we haven't gotten there yet, but we need constructive criticism for the West, and that's the part at which there's not going to be any Western people left, because the West, unfortunately, is a crater where commercialism hit. Sold every bit of the culture it could find. You're left with just one ideal, that it's definitely good to have sex with men if you're a man. It's definitely good for people to rule over you and for you not to have any moral agency. Oh, and then this other bit of you can make a difference with what you spend. All of it's lies, all of it's gone, all of it doesn't have anything to stand up on. I'm certainly not destroying anything. But hopefully offer constructive criticism for the West, and I know that however that's going to happen, that's the bit where there's not going to be a West left anymore. The West is a product of itself, its own imagination. It has no imagination other than the West. As soon as you hear about something outside the West, there's not going to be a West. Allah. Whose Twin Towers were they? Were they yours? Or were they on your side? There's the World Trade Center. I suppose it belonged to the world, huh? Oh, it was a center of trade in the world. That's exciting. Imagine the world is very rich and tall and slender and like two little dicks sitting side by side each other, joined by something tiny and ineffable. It's beautiful. The idea of just taking a passenger plane and using it as a cruise missile. Because we were getting cruise missiles on our passengers of homes. It's so minimal. There's never been, within all the terrorism, a campaign. You've seen organization, you've seen long planning times, you're not seeing a campaign. Nothing stopping us from doing campaigns, except for Allah. Nothing at all has stopped us from making campaigns, either of terror or of conquest. Except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's given very few of us the very good jobs of blowing up in places. Very few. And so, to me, they must be immaculately holy, because I'm really jealous. Come on, there's been like 20 in the West. Violent incidents from Muslims against the West. 30? Can you name 20? Propaganda. So out of all this war, I'm really happy we took down the Twin Towers. Like you've seen how this group accountability thing works. I'll take responsibility for Al Qaeda, sure. Yep. Alhamdulillah, we have won. Of all the wars, that's pretty. That's pretty. There were 2 towers there. Now there aren't. And look how much a portion of the world cried about it. Like hundreds of thousands of civilians gone in each of these big conflicts. Number 3, and they got up to 2 million civilians have been killed from the Muslim Ummah whilst we've been praying, living alongside you and not being resentful. And then one Twin Towers goes missing. Our freedom. It's something we can all look back on and laugh, hopefully. Inna lillahi wa ilayhi raji'un. And it's easier for me to look back on this and laugh, because if you die within that kind of scenario where you die in war for peace and it wasn't your fault, then it doesn't matter what kind of life you lived, you get a better place in heaven. It's like you lived the most immaculate life you could have because you died for the most immaculate reason. Everything else doesn't matter. You can, and that's all you got left after life, the next life. And that's going to turn out way better for you. If you're one of those people who was working under some employer one day, making somebody money for the world trade, somebody's who is going to make some big trade, and somebody, and then it's going to be in the world, and take a world, and there's going to be poorer people getting poorer, there's going to be richer people getting richer, there's going to be clouds up in the ceiling, and what for? Some world trade center people. And who was helping it along? Unfortunately, it was the office people. Were they guilty? Yeah, absolutely. Where are we going with the? There's not going to be a West. We just got to preach Islam. There's a system that works, and there's some people who need a system. Is it preach Islam or do some modern technical stuff on how exactly does an Islamic State look in 2020? It's that one. It's the academic look at how exactly a caliphate works in 2020. You don't get taxed until you're really rich, but you probably don't want money. We certainly don't want the old accounts of money, because all they do is keep track of who's rich and poor. And if we could forget that, that would be great. It's just all the resources. Competition for extra resources. It's okay as long as you're really clear on which resources are the ones that you can compete for and the ones that everyone needs. So like food, home, shelter. I think we call this economy and this commerce. What's commerce? Food can't be commerce. Living space can't be commerce. Health can't be commerce. An Xbox can be commerce. Oh, there's another category in between. Tools and things. Are tools part of the economy? Tools are part of the economy. Everyone has a right to all the tools they want. So it's kind of needs and wants, but attributing lots of needs to the people to hopefully, we want to make needs that everyone gets, which is easy. Enough food. There's no food shortage. Enough shelter. There's no shelter shortage. Enough tools. There's no tool shortage. You need like a library for tools, or you go online and say, I need a soldering iron. Click, it comes to you. We probably want to make the internet of tubes. If we could go back to 2001 and say, you know what, don't invade the Muslims, that's not going to work out very well for you. Instead, put those trillions of pounds and dollars, which many governments around the world are actually gambling with fuck, that's gross. Because it was costing like New Zealand to invade Iraq, and constantly today it's costing New Zealand to invade Iraq. They're not doing anything good. They're not proposing self-autonomy for any of the people, or it's a gamble to see if they make money out of it later. Moralizers. That's really gross. First they were gambling that you weren't going to get hit back, which it's a divine miracle. Nobody got hit back. I can't remember where I'm going. I'm flabbergasted that the governments have been gambling. Like, I knew they were gambling with lives, but I didn't know they were gambling with money too. We probably don't need money. Community service, you can get some points and get to have extra access to the extra resources, which aren't anything to do with food things. Make up your own jobs, get rewarded for them, seems excellent. Really don't want people following other men's instructions. You just spirals out of control. So infrastructure is important, the right for everyone to have internet, the immediate push to, there's Christians in the world. Christians need more Christian jobs. Christian jobs are like going out into the world and bringing the internet there without invading anything. I don't see many Christians invading these days. So good to have Christians on the earth today. Thank you, Christians. I don't see any Jews, Hindus, Buddha. We know there's a people without a culture. We know they don't have a name. I was here for some reason that I latched off of, getting flabbergasted at how evil the secular governments were. Costs New Zealand to be invading Iraq right now? Yes, it does. Bill, the people who are, what can we do? Help. I should definitely learn Arabic. That would help. Although we'll do that when it's time. What? Well, I'm thinking of the people in the place which we call Middle East as Arabia. What about it? They're going to be affected by having caliphate. We've thought about people in Saudi kingdom. We know we like those. They're not invading anyone, and probably the most popular monarchy in the world. I know I don't like all of the Saud's religious scholarship, but that seems not as big a deal as disinvading places. Disinvading places, well, we're obviously not going to ask the White House to disinvade. We're obviously not going to go for Operation Smack the side of the TV box. So this is a job for these people who live in the places which were invaded. Now, what do they do? It's easier for me to say than be there and stare down the biggest military forces that have ever been, and they've been there for 20 years. What, who? Everyone who's living in the secular state of Iraq needs to acknowledge the rights of the theocratic people in Iraq. You can't serve two masters. You gotta be one or the other. It's okay that there are secular Muslims in as much as the theocratic Muslims have enough tolerance to accept that. Now, if all the other people in the world can be tolerant of the theocratic Muslims, mashallah, wouldn't we have world peace? So weird. Calling out the secular people in, well, it's not secular people, it's just how people are organized. We're going to have a theocracy. Are we really going to have all these divisions left? We're going to have cultural distinctions. We're not changing anyone's ways. We're not asking anyone to do anything different, but God has divine revelations and they're going to make people change their ways. And no one had it correct to begin with. So it's just going to be equally, there were no categories. Here's the truth. You all had a piece of the truth. Now the truth has come together. Here's the big truth. Good. We're all happy and united. What kind of steps are in the middle? God's going to make sure all that will just be clear. That'll be part of what it says. Here's the sense. Here's how it all works, and they'll be inextricable. Good. Do I need to not worry about anything at all? No, I don't think so. I think that's the end of this recap. I mainly wanted to speak about the homosexual thing, and I've done that, which is we don't have a category of homosexual, nor does fucking Pope Francis. I bet he does. Peace.